Commander had never questioned an order from the High Council before. Standing in the pristine white chamber aboard the flagship Dominion's Edge, he stared at the holographic display showing a single human female. The image rotated slowly, revealing unremarkable features by standards. Brown hair, average height, no visible cybernetic enhancements or weapon modifications. Yet this creature had somehow destroyed 3 of their forward scout ships and eliminated an entire platoon of elite warriors. Her name is Dr. Sarah, High Admiral continued, his 4 arms gesturing at the tactical display. Human, age 32 standard cycles. She was conducting research on the outer rim world of 442b when our forces attempted to establish a mining outpost. His mandibles clicked in confusion. Admiral, with respect, she appears to be an ordinary human scientist. Surely our standard elimination protocols would suffice for such a target. The Admiral's crimson eyes narrowed. That is what we thought when we sent Captain Ok's unit. 12 of our finest warriors armed with plasma rifles and shock weapons. They cornered her in some primitive research facility. The hologram shifted to show smoking wreckage and scattered armor pieces. This was what remained. Impossible, breathed. The destruction was thorough, professional. Only someone with extensive military training and access to heavy weaponry could have caused such devastation. The second team we sent was led by War Leader L, 24 elite soldiers with full combat armor and support drones. Another image materialized, showing an even larger field of debris. She eliminated them within 6 minutes of engagement. Secondary heart began beating faster. L had been his training partner at the War Academy. The warrior had single-handedly conquered 4 human colonies and was considered one of their most effective field commanders. The third attempt involved a full strike force, 48 warriors, 3 hover tanks, and aerial support. The Admiral's voice carried a note of something had never heard before from a superior officer: fear. She destroyed everything we sent and transmitted a message to our fleet afterward. The hologram shifted to show Doctor standing amid the wreckage, her research coat somehow still clean despite the carnage around her. When she spoke, her voice was calm, almost conversational. To whoever sent these soldiers, she began, her brown eyes looking directly into the recording device. I came here to study the fascinating ecosystem of this planet. Your people attacked my research station and killed my colleagues while I was in the field collecting samples. I've now asked you 3 times to leave this world in peace. I won't ask again. The message ended, leaving the chamber in silence. Studied the aftermath images more carefully. The tactical precision was remarkable. Each position had been eliminated with minimal collateral damage to the surrounding environment. Whoever this human was, she possessed an understanding of warfare that rivaled the Empire's most seasoned generals. This is why we're deploying the Juggernaut prototype, Admiral explained. Codenamed Bone Crusher, it represents 5 years of our most advanced weapons research. 30 feet tall, armed with quantum disruption cannons, molecular destabilization beams, and enough armor plating to withstand a direct hit from a stellar destroyer. Had heard whispers about the Juggernaut program. The massive war machines were designed to be unstoppable, capable of single-handedly conquering entire worlds. Only the Empire's most skilled pilots were even allowed to see the prototypes, let alone operate them. You want me to pilot it against one human scientist? He asked. I want you to end this threat before it spreads, the Admiral replied sharply. Intelligence reports indicate that other human governments are taking notice of these incidents. If word spreads that a single human can defeat our finest warriors, it could inspire rebellion throughout our territories. The logic was sound, though couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. He'd studied human military tactics during his advanced strategic training. They were known for being resourceful and unpredictable, but this level of capability from a non-combatant seemed unlikely. What do we know about her background? He inquired. Admiral pulled up additional files. Dr. Sarah graduated from Earth's Cambridge University with degrees in xenobiology and environmental sciences. Published 37 research papers on alien ecosystems. No military service recorded. No combat training in her official records. Examine the academic credentials more closely. The research papers dealt with complex biological systems and survival adaptations in extreme environments. One study caught his attention: predator-prey dynamics in high-stress ecosystems, adaptive strategies for survival. Has anyone considered that her scientific background might be relevant to her combat effectiveness? He suggested. The Admiral dismissed the idea with a wave of his upper right arm. Irrelevant. The Juggernaut will resolve this situation quickly and decisively. You depart in 2 hours. As made his way to the deployment bay, he couldn't stop thinking about the strange confidence in Doctor's recorded message. Most beings faced with the might of the Empire showed fear, desperation, or anger. She had displayed none of these emotions. Instead, there had been something else in her expression, something that reminded him of how apex predators looked when establishing territory. The Bone Crusher stood in the center of the deployment bay like a metallic mountain. Its angular design incorporated elements of architecture, all sharp edges and aggressive lines. The quantum disruption cannons mounted on its shoulders could punch through a battleship's hull, while the molecular destabilization beam could reduce matter to its component atoms. The armor plating had been forged from collapsed stellar material, making it virtually indestructible. Chief Engineer approached as examined the war machine. Beautiful, isn't she? Took us 3 cycles just to develop the targeting systems. The artificial intelligence can track and engage up to 200 separate targets simultaneously. What are its operational parameters? Asked. 15 hours of continuous combat capability, self-repairing systems, and enough firepower to level a small city. The pilot interface has been designed for maximum efficiency. You'll be linked directly to the machine's sensor array and weapons systems through neural connection. Climbed into the cockpit and settled into the pilot's chair. The neural interface headset felt heavy against his skull as the technicians activated the connection protocols. Immediately, his awareness expanded. He could feel the Juggernaut systems like extensions of his own body. The sensor arrays became his eyes, capable of detecting movement across multiple spectrums. The weapons systems responded to his thoughts as naturally as moving his own limbs. Systems check complete, Chief Engineer announced. All weapons functional, armor integrity at maximum, AI assistance online. You're cleared for deployment. The transport ship Retribution carried the Juggernaut to 442B in complete silence. Used the travel time to study everything available about the planet. It was a garden world with Earth-like conditions, abundant vegetation, and diverse wildlife. Doctor's research station was located in a temperate forest region near the equator. During the final approach, long-range sensors detected no signs of military installations or defensive positions. The planet appeared exactly as described in the initial survey reports, a peaceful research outpost with minimal infrastructure. Yet somewhere down there, a human scientist had somehow eliminated 74 elite warriors and destroyed millions of credits worth of military equipment. Beginning atmospheric entry, announced the transport pilot. Target coordinates locked, deploying Juggernaut in 3 minutes. Activated the war machine systems and felt the familiar surge of power as the weapons came online. Through the enhanced sensors, he could see the forest canopy rushing up to meet them. The drop pod separated from the transport ship and plummeted toward the surface, retro thrusters firing to control the descent. Impact came with a tremendous crash that flattened trees in a 100-meter radius. The Bone Crusher rose from the smoking crater, 30 feet of gleaming death standing amid the alien forest. Birds scattered from nearby trees, and small creatures fled through the undergrowth. Juggernaut operational, reported through the communications array. Beginning search for target. The enhanced sensors immediately began cataloging the environment. Thousands of life forms registered on the detection grid, from microscopic organisms to large herbivores grazing in distant clearings. The AI system filtered through the data, identifying and dismissing non-threatening signatures. Doctor's research station lay 2 kilometers to the east. The facility consisted of several prefabricated buildings connected by covered walkways, surrounded by various scientific equipment and sample storage units. Long-range scans revealed no defensive installations, no weapon emplacements, no signs of military preparation. Began moving through the forest, the Juggernaut's massive feet crushing everything in their path. Trees that had grown for centuries were reduced to splinters. The ground shook with each step, announcing his approach to every creature for kilometers around. Halfway to the target, the proximity sensors detected movement. A single human figure emerged from behind a cluster of large trees, walking calmly toward the approaching war machine. Even at this distance, could see it was Doctor. She wore the same research coat from the recorded message, carried no visible weapons, and showed no signs of fear. "Target acquired," he reported, bringing the Juggernaut to a halt 50 meters away. The quantum disruption cannons automatically tracked her movement, waiting for the firing command. Doctor stopped walking and looked up at the massive war machine. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the external audio pickups. "I really hoped it wouldn't come to this," she said, her tone suggesting genuine regret. "I tried to warn your people, but they don't seem to understand the concept of leaving well enough alone." Activated the external speakers. "Dr. Sarah, by order of the High Command, you are sentenced to immediate termination for crimes against the Empire." She tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. "Tell me something, pilot. Do you know what I study?" The question caught him off guard. "You are." "That's right. I study how different species adapt to survive in hostile environments." She gestured at the forest around them. "This planet has one of the most complex ecosystems I've ever encountered. Thousands of species, all interconnected in ways that took me months to understand." His finger hovered over the firing control. Something about her calm demeanor was deeply unsettling. "Surrender now and your death will be quick." Doctor smiled and for the first time saw something predatory in her expression. "You know what I learned during my research here? Every ecosystem has its apex predator, the creature that sits at the top of the food chain, keeping everything else in balance." She paused, her brown eyes never leaving the Juggernaut's optical sensors. "But what happens when a new predator enters that ecosystem, one that doesn't understand the rules?" Before it could respond, the forest around them began to move. It started as a subtle shifting in the undergrowth, barely noticeable through the Juggernaut's sensors. Then the movement became more pronounced. Vines that had appeared to be hanging innocently from tree branches suddenly writhed with purpose. Flowers that had seemed decorative revealed rows of needle-sharp thorns. The very ground beneath the war machine's feet began to pulse with organic activity. "What you've never understood about humans," Doctor continued conversationally, "is that we're incredibly good at making friends, especially when we're all facing the same threat." The attack came from every direction simultaneously. Massive root systems erupted from the earth, wrapping around the Juggernaut's legs with crushing force. Acidic sap sprayed from specialized plant organs, immediately beginning to eat through the molecular armor plating. Swarms of insect-like creatures, each the size of a human fist, descended from the canopy and began burrowing into any gaps they could find in the war machine's hull. Fired the quantum disruption cannons, the energy beams tearing through vegetation and leaving smoking craters in the forest floor. But for every plant destroyed, 3 more took its place. The molecular destabilization beam carved molten furrows through the attacking flora, but the forest kept coming. "Impossible," he whispered, watching his sensor displays fill with thousands of hostile contacts. "Plants cannot coordinate attacks." Doctor's voice reached him through the chaos. "They can when someone teaches them how, when someone shows them that working together makes them stronger than the sum of their parts." The root systems had completely immobilized the Juggernaut's legs, holding the massive war machine in place, while other organisms focused their assault on critical systems. The acidic attacks were eating through armor plating that was supposed to be indestructible. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as system after system reported damage. Tried to activate the self-repair protocols, but even those were being overwhelmed. The attacking organisms seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum effect. They targeted sensor arrays, weapon systems, and structural weak points with surgical precision. "How?" he demanded through the external speakers. 3 months of careful study," Doctor replied. "Learning their language, understanding their needs, showing them what cooperation can accomplish." She paused. Commander awakened to the steady hum of medical equipment and the antiseptic smell of the flagships. His lower body felt strange, disconnected somehow. When he attempted to move his legs, nothing happened. Panic flooded through him as the full scope of his situation became clear. "You're fortunate to be alive," Chief Medical Officer stated matter-of-factly as she reviewed his charts. The emergency ejection system activated just before the Juggernaut's core went critical. However, the organic acids had already begun dissolving the cockpit's lower section. We had to amputate both legs at the knee to prevent the corrosive compounds from reaching vital organs. Stared at the space where his legs should have been, trying to process what he was seeing. He had been the Empire's finest pilot, selected specifically for his quick reflexes and tactical brilliance. Now he was a cripple, destroyed by a human scientist and her impossible army of plants. "The Admiral wants to see you immediately," Doctor continued. "I've recommended rest, but he insisted the debriefing couldn't wait." The journey to the command center took place in a floating medical chair that responded to neural commands. Found the experience humiliating, being wheeled through corridors where he had once walked with pride. Other officers tried not to stare, but he could feel their eyes following him as he passed. High Admiral was studying tactical displays when arrived. The holographic images showed the remains of the Bone Crusher, now completely overgrown with aggressive vegetation. What had once been the Empire's most advanced war machine was barely recognizable beneath layers of vines, moss, and strange flowering growths. "Explain," the Admiral commanded without preamble. Recounted the events on 442B, from the initial approach to his emergency evacuation. He described the coordinated plant attack, the systematic dismantling of the Juggernaut systems, and Doctor's claims about forming a symbiotic relationship with the planet's ecosystem. Admiral listened without interruption, his forearms clasped behind his back. When the report concluded, he turned to face the wounded pilot. "You're suggesting that a human somehow convinced an entire planet to fight for her?" "That appears to be the case, sir. The level of coordination was unlike anything in our tactical databases. Individual plant species working together with perfect timing, targeting our most vulnerable systems with surgical precision." "Plants don't have military training, Commander. They don't understand warfare or strategic targeting." Had been wrestling with the same question during his recovery. "I believe Doctor provided that knowledge. She studied our previous attacks, analyzed our equipment specifications, and taught the ecosystem how to counter our advantages." The Admiral activated a new holographic display showing Doctor's academic records. "According to intelligence, she has no military background. How does a civilian researcher acquire such detailed knowledge of combat systems?" "Humans are known for their ability to adapt and learn quickly," replied. "Perhaps we underestimated her analytical capabilities." Admiral began packing, his heavy footsteps echoing in the command chamber. "This situation has become politically complicated. The High Council is demanding explanations for how a single human destroyed our most advanced prototype. Other species in our territory are beginning to ask questions." Understood the implications. The Empire maintained control through the perception of absolute military superiority. If word spread that their finest weapons could be defeated by a lone human scientist, it would encourage rebellion throughout their conquered territories. "What are your recommendations, sir?" he asked. "That's what I'm trying to determine." The Admiral pulled up additional files showing recent intelligence reports. "Since your defeat, there have been 17 separate incidents across our outer territories. Human research teams suddenly developing aggressive defensive capabilities, alien species forming unusual alliances, and our forward scouts reporting unexplained equipment failures." The pattern was troubling. It seemed that Doctor's victory was inspiring others to resist expansion using unconventional methods. Traditional military responses were proving ineffective against opponents who refused to fight according to established rules. "Sir, if I may suggest something," ventured, "perhaps we're approaching this situation incorrectly." Admiral's crimson eyes narrowed. "Explain." Doctor's initial message mentioned that she came to 442B to study the ecosystem peacefully. Our forces attacked her research station and killed her colleagues. From her perspective, she was defending herself against unprovoked aggression. "Are you suggesting we were wrong to eliminate a potential threat?" Chose his words carefully. "I'm suggesting that we created the threat through our actions. If we had established diplomatic contact instead of immediately deploying military force, the situation might have developed differently." The Admiral's mandibles clicked in disapproval. "The Empire does not negotiate with inferior species. We conquer, we control, we maintain order through strength. That approach worked when we faced opponents who fought according to conventional tactics," replied. "But humans seem to specialize in finding unconventional solutions to military problems." Before Admiral could respond, an urgent communication signal interrupted their conversation. The holographic display shifted to show Captain X of the destroyer Iron Talon. Admiral, we have a situation developing in the Rigel system. The human research station on Rigel VII has somehow convinced the local crystalline entities to assist in their defense. Our mining operation is under attack by sentient rocks. Admiral's expression darkened. What do you mean by sentient rocks? The crystal formations are moving independently and demonstrating tactical awareness. They're systematically destroying our excavation equipment while protecting the human facilities. Our weapons seem to have minimal effect on them. Leaned forward in his medical chair. Captain, are there any humans with or planetary science backgrounds at that research station? Captain X consulted his reports. Dr. James, specialist in crystalline structures and mineral consciousness. He's been studying the Rigel VII formations for approximately 6 months. The pattern was becoming clearer. Wherever human scientists were conducting long-term research, they seemed to be developing protective relationships with local species or phenomena. It wasn't random violence, but a systematic approach to planetary defense using indigenous resources. Admiral said quietly, I think we're dealing with something more significant than isolated incidents. Admiral terminated the communication with Captain X and turned back to the tactical displays. What are you suggesting? That humans have developed a new form of warfare. Instead of bringing weapons to a conflict, they're convincing the environment itself to become their ally. It's like they're turning entire planets into living fortresses. The implications were staggering. Traditional military doctrine assumed that conquered territories would remain passive once their organized resistance was eliminated. But if human scientists could teach ecosystems to fight back, every occupied world potentially became a powder keg waiting to explode. That's impossible, Admiral stated. Ecosystems don't have unified consciousness. They can't make strategic decisions or coordinate complex attacks. Neither do individual soldiers, pointed out. But when properly commanded and coordinated, they become an effective fighting force. Perhaps humans have found a way to provide that command structure to natural systems. A new communication signal arrived, this time from the Outer Rim territories. Commander Al of the battlecruiser Dominator appeared in holographic form, his usually composed demeanor showing signs of stress. Admiral, we've lost contact with the Vega system patrol fleet. Their last transmission mentioned unusual behavior from the gas giant's atmospheric organisms, something about jellyfish-like creatures interfering with our ship systems. Admiral's secondary hearts began beating faster. How many ships were in that patrol? 12 vessels, including 2 heavy cruisers, were dispatching a search and rescue squadron, but... Commander Al hesitated. Sir, there's something else. We've detected human communication signals coming from the research station on Vega Prime. Dr. Marine Biology Specialist. Felt a chill run through his remaining limbs. Admiral, we need to consider the possibility that these aren't isolated incidents. If humans are systematically establishing defensive partnerships with alien ecosystems, we could be facing a new kind of threat. One that our conventional forces aren't equipped to handle, Admiral finished grimly. Weapons designed to fight armies are useless against opponents who don't present traditional targets. The strategic situation was unlike anything the Empire had encountered in centuries of expansion. They had conquered dozens of species by overwhelming them with superior technology and coordinated military force. But humans seemed to be rewriting the rules of engagement, turning the very planets themselves into weapons. Sir, I request permission to analyze human research methodologies, said. If we can understand how they're establishing these relationships, we might be able to develop countermeasures. Admiral considered the proposal. What do you have in mind? Doctor mentioned that she spent months learning to communicate with the 442B ecosystem. There must be specific techniques or technologies involved. If we can identify and disrupt those communication methods, we might be able to break the alliances they're forming. Or, the Admiral said thoughtfully, we could learn to use those same techniques ourselves. The idea hung in the air between them, radical and potentially blasphemous by standards. The Empire had always relied on technological superiority and brute force. The concept of forming partnerships with conquered worlds was antithetical to everything they believed about proper governance. That would require a fundamental shift in our approach to territorial expansion, observed. The alternative is watching our outer territories fall to an enemy we can't effectively fight, Admiral replied. The High Council won't tolerate continued failures, especially after the loss of the Juggernaut prototype. Another communication signal arrived, this one marked with maximum priority encryption. The holographic display showed High Counselor, the Empire's supreme military authority. His presence in the communication meant that the situation had reached the highest levels of government. Admiral, report immediately to the capital for emergency council session. Bring commander and all data regarding the human incidents. The Emperor himself has taken interest in these developments. The communication ended abruptly, leaving the command chamber in stunned silence. In 300 years of service, Admiral had never been summoned to a direct audience with Emperor. The fact that was specifically requested meant that his first-hand experience with Doctor's tactics was considered invaluable intelligence. Prepare for immediate departure, the Admiral commanded. And Commander, start working on a comprehensive analysis of human research methodologies. I suspect our conversation with the High Council is going to determine the Empire's future strategy. As they prepared for the journey to the capital, couldn't stop thinking about Doctor's words. Next time, try asking nicely. At the time, he had dismissed them as human arrogance. Now he wondered if they might have been genuine advice from someone who understood things the Empire had never bothered to learn. The thought that a legless pilot and a human might hold the key to the Empire's survival struck him as deeply ironic. But as reports continued arriving from across the outer territories, each describing similar incidents of humans forming defensive alliances with alien ecosystems, he began to realize that traditional military thinking might no longer be adequate. The war was changing, and the Empire was falling behind. Who came here to learn, not to conquer. The forest helped me bury them, and then it asked me what we could do to make sure it never happened again. The Juggernaut's main power core began fluctuating as organic tendrils worked their way into the energy distribution systems. Realized with growing horror that the war machine was being systematically dismantled by an opponent he couldn't effectively fight. Every weapon he fired only seemed to anger the forest more. "You're controlling all of this?" he asked. Doctor shook her head. "I'm not controlling anything. I'm just part of the ecosystem now, a new kind of symbiotic relationship." Her expression grew sad. "I tried to warn your people, I really did, but sometimes the only language a bully understands is force." The neural interface began sending pain signals as the forest's assault reached the cockpit systems. Could feel the Juggernaut dying around him, its mighty weapons reduced to scrap metal by an enemy that couldn't even be properly targeted. As consciousness faded and emergency systems prepared to eject him from the failing war machine, the last thing he heard was Doctor's voice, somehow carrying a note of genuine sympathy. "Tell your superiors that 442B is under new management, and next time, try asking nicely." The imperial capital of Prime stretched across 3 continents, its crystalline spires reaching toward the crimson sky like metallic claws. As their transport ship descended through the atmosphere, could see the massive military complexes that housed the Empire's most advanced research facilities and strategic command centers. Somewhere in those gleaming towers, the High Council was preparing to decide the fate of their expansion policies. Admiral had spent the journey reviewing intelligence reports that painted an increasingly grim picture. 17 separate incidents across the outer territories, each involving human researchers forming defensive alliances with local ecosystems or phenomena. The pattern was undeniable, but its implications challenged everything the Empire understood about warfare and territorial control. "Commander," the Admiral said as their transport approached the Imperial landing platform, "when we address the High Council, remember that many of them have never encountered humans directly. They may not understand the significance of what we're reporting." Adjusted his position in the floating medical chair, still struggling to adapt to his new limitations. "What do you think they'll want to do?" "Probably authorize overwhelming force. Deploy entire battle fleets to sterilize the affected worlds and eliminate the human presence completely." The thought made uncomfortable. During his recovery, he had studied Doctor's published research papers more carefully. Her work showed genuine respect for alien life forms and a desire to understand rather than exploit them. The idea of destroying such knowledge felt wasteful, even by imperial standards. "Sir, what if there's another option? Admiral's mandibles clicked in curiosity. Explain. These humans seem to possess skills that could be valuable to the Empire. Instead of destroying them, perhaps we could find a way to recruit them. The Admiral's expression grew thoughtful. Turn their abilities to our advantage rather than fighting against them. Exactly. If they can teach ecosystems to coordinate defensive actions, imagine what they could accomplish working for us instead of against us. Before Admiral could respond, their transport settled onto the landing platform with a soft vibration. Through the viewports, could see a formal honor guard waiting to escort them to the High Council chambers. The presence of ceremonial guards rather than standard military personnel indicated that this meeting carried exceptional importance. The journey through the Imperial Palace took them past displays of conquered worlds and subjugated species. Holographic exhibits showed the Empire's 3-century expansion, from their home system to their current domain, spanning 47 star systems. Each display emphasized the superiority of technology and military doctrine, the inevitable triumph of order over chaos. Found himself wondering what those displays would look like if they included recent events. Images of plant armies dismantling advanced war machines, crystalline entities protecting human research stations, and atmospheric organisms disabling entire patrol fleets would certainly change the narrative. The High Council chamber was a massive circular room with seating arranged in concentric rings. At the center sat Emperor himself, a towering figure whose 4 arms had been enhanced with cybernetic augmentations that gleamed like polished weapons. His presence dominated the space, radiating authority that had been refined over decades of absolute rule. Admiral, Commander, the Emperor's voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Approach and present your findings. As they moved to the center of the chamber, noticed that the usual complement of 12 council members had been expanded to include representatives from various military branches and intelligence services. The presence of so many high-ranking officials meant that word of the human incidents had spread throughout the imperial hierarchy. Admiral activated the holographic display system and began presenting their compiled intelligence. The images showed the destruction of the Juggernaut prototype, the reports from Rigel VII and the Vega system, and 17 other similar incidents. Each case demonstrated the same pattern: human researchers establishing protective relationships with local ecosystems or phenomena. These incidents represent a new form of warfare, the Admiral concluded, one that our traditional military doctrine is not equipped to counter effectively. High Counselor, the Empire's supreme military authority, leaned forward in his seat. You're suggesting that individual humans somehow convinced entire planets to fight for them. That appears to be the case, Counselor. Commander witnessed it firsthand during his encounter with Dr. All attention turned to, who felt uncomfortably exposed under the scrutiny of the Empire's most powerful leaders. Esteemed council members, what I observed on 442 be conventional understanding of planetary ecosystems. The level of coordination and tactical awareness displayed by the attacking organisms suggested direct communication and training. Emperor's cybernetic arms moved with mechanical precision as he accessed data files. Dr. Sarah published research on ecosystem dynamics and species adaptation, no military background or combat training. He paused, studying the information more carefully. How does a civilian scientist acquire the knowledge necessary to defeat our finest warriors? Respectfully, Your Majesty, I believe we may have underestimated human analytical capabilities, replied. Doctor mentioned that she studied our previous attacks and learned from observing our tactics. Humans appear to be exceptionally good at recognizing patterns and adapting to new situations. Counselor Al of the Intelligence Division activated his own display showing additional data. Our surveillance of human territories indicates that this phenomenon is spreading. Research teams throughout their space are requesting transfers to frontier worlds where they can study exotic ecosystems and unusual life forms. The implication was clear. The incidents they were observing weren't random occurrences, but part of a systematic effort to establish defensive alliances throughout human space. What had begun as isolated research projects was evolving into a coordinated strategy. Recommend immediate military response, declared War Marshal. Deploy battle fleets to eliminate all human research installations before this contamination spreads further. Agreed, added Fleet Commander. Overwhelming force applied quickly will prevent these techniques from being shared with other species in our territories. Emperor raised one cybernetic hand, calling for silence. Commander, you seem to have reservations about that approach. Chose his words carefully, aware that his next statement could be considered treasonous by some council members. Your Majesty, during my analysis of Doctor's research, I discovered that her work could potentially benefit the Empire rather than threaten it. The chamber fell completely silent. Several council members exchanged glances that suggested they considered such a statement borderline blasphemous. Explain, the Emperor commanded. Human researchers seem to possess unique abilities for understanding and communicating with alien ecosystems. If these skills could be directed toward imperial goals instead of working against them, we might be able to establish more effective control over conquered territories. High Counselor's mandibles clicked in disapproval. You're suggesting we negotiate with humans. The Empire does not bargain with inferior species. With respect, Counselor, our current approach isn't working, replied. Traditional military force is ineffective against opponents who can turn entire planets into weapons. We need new strategies to counter new threats. Admiral stepped forward to support his officer. Your Majesty, Commander's observations align with our tactical analysis. Conventional warfare assumes that conquered territories will remain passive once organized resistance is eliminated. But if humans can teach ecosystems to continue fighting indefinitely, every occupied world becomes a potential rebellion. Emperor accessed more data files, studying reports from across the outer territories. Intelligence estimates suggest that human research teams are present on approximately 40% of worlds within our expansion zone. If they all develop defensive capabilities similar to what we've observed. He didn't need to finish the statement. The implications were staggering. 40% of their planned expansion territories could potentially become unconquerable if human researchers succeeded in establishing planetary alliances. What exactly are you proposing? Counselor asked. That we attempt to recruit key human researchers instead of eliminating them, Admiral replied. Offer them positions within the Imperial research hierarchy, access to advanced technology, and opportunities to study ecosystems throughout our territories. War Marshal's four arms gestured dismissively. Absurd. Humans cannot be trusted with Imperial secrets or advanced technology. They seem to be developing effective technology on their own, observed. Doctor somehow convinced an entire planetary ecosystem to coordinate attacks against our most advanced war machine. That level of achievement suggests capabilities we don't fully understand. Emperor activated a private communication channel, speaking briefly with someone outside the chamber. When he returned his attention to the council, his expression had grown more thoughtful. Intelligence reports indicate that human governments are taking notice of these incidents, he announced. Their military leaders are requesting detailed briefings from the researchers involved. It appears they recognize the strategic value of what their scientists have accomplished. The revelation added urgency to their deliberations. If human military forces learn to apply these ecosystem alliance techniques systematically, the Empire could face organized resistance on a scale they had never encountered. Your Majesty, said carefully, perhaps we could arrange a direct communication with Doctor. Her initial message suggested that she would prefer peaceful coexistence to continued conflict. You want to open diplomatic channels with a human who destroyed our most advanced prototype? Counselor Al asked incredulously. I want to understand her motivations and capabilities before we make decisions that could affect the Empire's future expansion, replied. Doctor demonstrated remarkable tactical knowledge and resourcefulness. Those are exactly the qualities we value in Imperial officers. Emperor considered the proposal for several minutes, his cybernetic arms moving through complex calculation gestures. Finally, he reached a decision. We will attempt limited contact with this doctor, he announced. Not as negotiation, but as intelligence gathering. Commander, since you have direct experience with her capabilities, you will lead this communication effort. Your Majesty, I'm honored, but given my current condition, gestured at his missing legs. Your disability is irrelevant to this mission, the Emperor stated firmly. What matters is your first-hand knowledge of human unconventional warfare techniques. You will establish contact with Doctor and determine whether her skills can be turned to Imperial advantage. High Counselor's expression showed clear disapproval, and if she refuses to cooperate, Emperor's cybernetic arms moved into what recognized as a combat-ready position. Then, we implement War Marshal's recommendation and eliminate all human research installations simultaneously. But first, we explore whether there might be a more profitable alternative. As the council session concluded, and plans began forming for the unprecedented diplomatic mission, found himself wondering what Doctor would make of this development. The human who had turned a peaceful forest into a weapon of war was about to receive an offer that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Whether she would accept or reject that offer might determine whether the next phase of Imperial expansion succeeded or failed catastrophically. The communication ship diplomatic envoy had been hastily retrofitted for its unusual mission. Unlike the Empire's typical warships, this vessel carried no visible weapons and broadcast continuous peaceful intent signals on all frequencies. Admiral had insisted that their approach to 442B should demonstrate respect rather than threat, a concept that required extensive explanation to the engineering crews. Floated in his command chair on the bridge, studying long-range sensor data as they approached the planet. 3 months had passed since his encounter with Doctor, and the changes were immediately apparent. What had once been a simple research outpost had expanded into something unprecedented in Imperial experience. "Commander, you need to see this," reported Sensor Operator, his voice carrying notes of amazement and confusion. The main display shifted to show 442B from orbital perspective. The planet's surface showed clear signs of rapid development, but not in any pattern they had ever encountered. Instead of geometric cities or industrial complexes, vast organic networks stretched across entire continents. Massive trees connected by aerial root systems formed living bridges spanning hundreds of kilometers. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed through the vegetation in what appeared to be planet-wide communication networks. "Fascinating," breathed Doctor, the assigned to their mission. "The ecosystem appears to have developed continental-scale coordination. This level of integration should take to evolve naturally." Admiral activated the communication array. "Doctor, this is Admiral of the Empire. We request permission to meet with you under diplomatic protocols." The response came within minutes, but not through their communication systems. Instead, the planet's bioluminescent networks began pulsing in coordinated patterns. The light show was visible even from orbit, creating messages written in letters hundreds of kilometers tall. "Welcome back, Commander AR. The Forest RMBRSU." Felt his secondary heart skip beats. How could the planet possibly know I'm aboard this ship? Doctor was analyzing sensor data frantically. The bioluminescent network appears to be detecting and processing our ship's electromagnetic signatures. It's like the entire planetary ecosystem has become a massive sensory organ. Admiral tried again through conventional channels. "Doctor, we come seeking discussion, not conflict. Will you meet with us?" This time, the response came through their communication systems, though the signals seemed to originate from multiple points across the planet simultaneously. "Admiral, you're welcome to visit, but you should understand that things have changed since Commander's last visit. 442B is no longer just my research site. It's become something new." "Explain," the Admiral requested. "It's easier to show you. Land at the coordinates I'm transmitting. Bring only peaceful intentions and an open mind." The landing coordinates led them to a clearing that hadn't existed in the orbital surveys from previous mission. As their shuttle descended, he could see that the forest had literally reshaped itself to create a landing area, with massive trees forming natural hangar walls and a canopy of branches providing overhead protection. Doctor was waiting for them when they disembarked, but she wasn't alone. Immediately noticed that her appearance had changed. Her brown hair now contained streaks of green that seemed to shift color in response to the surrounding vegetation. Her eyes held flecks of gold that hadn't been there before, and her movements showed a fluid grace that suggested enhanced coordination. More striking were her companions. A dozen beings from various species stood beside her, each showing similar modifications that seemed to blend their natural characteristics with traits from local organisms. Recognized a crystalline being whose normally translucent form now pulsed with organic bioluminescence, and what appeared to be a whose chitinous exoskeleton had developed photosynthetic patches. "Welcome to the symbiosis," Doctor said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated with the forest sounds around them. "I'm glad you decided to talk instead of shooting this time." Admiral stepped forward, his four arms positioned in formal diplomatic posture. "Doctor, we come seeking to understand what you've accomplished here and whether there might be opportunities for cooperation." Doctor smiled and noticed that even her dental structure seemed to have been modified. "Cooperation, that's exactly what this is all about." She gestured at the transformed forest around them. "When your people first attacked my research station, I was studying ecosystem dynamics in isolation. Academic research, theoretical models, paper publications." She began walking along a path that seemed to form itself beneath their feet as they moved. "But then I lost my colleagues, good people who came here to learn and discover. The forest helped me understand that knowledge without application is incomplete." "What kind of application?" Doctor asked, his scientific curiosity overcoming diplomatic protocol. "True symbiosis," replied the being, his crystalline form chiming with musical tones. "Not the simple mutualism that most species practice, but genuine integration. Sharing capabilities, combining strengths, creating something greater than the sum of individual parts." Admiral's mandibles clicked nervously. "You're describing fundamental alteration of species characteristics." "Evolution through choice rather than random mutation," Doctor confirmed. "The forest taught me that consciousness and biological systems can merge in ways that preserve individual identity while enhancing collective capability." They reached a clearing where an extraordinary structure rose from the forest floor. It appeared to be part building, part organism, with walls that breathed and surfaces that responded to touch. Doorways dilated open as they approached, revealing interior spaces filled with soft, organic lighting. "This is our research center," Doctor explained as they entered. "Built through cooperation between human engineering knowledge, plant construction capabilities, and contributions from our new partners." The interior was unlike anything in experience. Living walls displayed holographic data that seemed to grow like flowers, responding to observers' questions by blooming new information displays. The air itself felt intelligent, carrying chemical messages that somehow conveyed meaning directly to their consciousness. "How many species are involved in this symbiosis?" Admiral asked. "Currently 47 different forms of consciousness," replied the being. "Though the number grows as word spreads, we've had delegations from 12 different star systems requesting to learn our integration techniques." Felt a chill of recognition. "You're spreading this beyond just 442b." Doctor nodded. "Knowledge wants to be shared, but we're very careful about who we accept. The symbiosis only works for consciousness that genuinely seeks cooperation over domination." The statement carried obvious implications about the Empire's typical approach to expansion. Admiral chose to address it directly. "Doctor, the Empire has historically maintained order through strength and clear hierarchies. Your model suggests a fundamentally different approach to governance." "Not governance," she corrected. "Partnership. The forest doesn't govern the trees, the ocean doesn't govern the fish. Complex systems maintain stability through cooperation and shared benefit, not through imposed control." Doctor was examining the living displays with obvious fascination. "The level of biotechnology integration here exceeds anything in our research databases. How did you achieve such rapid development?" "Time moves differently when you're not fighting against natural processes," Doctor replied. "Human innovation, plant construction capabilities, crystalline information processing, atmospheric chemistry optimization. When dozens of different forms of intelligence work together, development accelerates exponentially." Admiral seemed to be struggling with the concept. "But without central authority, how do you maintain order? How do you prevent conflicts between different species interests?" Doctor led them to a central chamber where a massive organic structure pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. "This is our consensus engine. It processes input from all symbiosis members and identifies solutions that benefit everyone involved. Conflicts are resolved through understanding rather than force." "And if someone refuses to accept the consensus?" asked. "Then they're probably not ready for true symbiosis," replied the. "We've had a few individuals try to exploit our openness for personal gain. The network identified their intentions quickly and helped them find other opportunities that better matched their goals. The implication was clear. The symbiosis had built-in methods for detecting and managing selfish behavior without resorting to punishment or exclusion. Admiral activated his private communication implant briefly before addressing Doctor again. The Empire is interested in exploring potential cooperation agreements. What would such a relationship look like from your perspective? Doctor's expression grew thoughtful. That depends on what the Empire is really seeking. If you want to learn symbiosis techniques to enhance your existing territorial control model, we're not interested. That would be using cooperation as another form of domination. But if you're genuinely interested in evolving beyond the conquest paradigm, she continued, then there are extraordinary possibilities. Imagine what the Empire could accomplish if every world in your territory was a willing partner rather than a subjugated possession. Found himself intrigued despite his imperial conditioning. What would that look like practically? Worlds that develop their full potential because they want to contribute, not because they're forced to. Species sharing knowledge and capabilities because they benefit from cooperation. Defense that happens naturally because everyone has investment in protecting the whole. Doctor was studying readouts from the consensus engine. Doctor, the processing power required for coordinating activities across multiple star systems would be enormous. How do you manage the computational complexity? We don't manage it, she replied with a smile. We participate in it. The network doesn't require central processing because every node contributes to the calculations. Distributed intelligence scales naturally as more consciousness joins the system. Admiral looked troubled. Such a system would fundamentally change how the Empire operates. The High Council would need to relinquish absolute authority. Authority based on cooperation is stronger than authority based on fear, Doctor observed. Leaders who serve their people's interests have more real power than those who simply command obedience. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the consensus engine. The bioluminescent patterns shifted to show communications arriving from other systems, each reporting new developments in the spreading symbiosis network. Admiral, Doctor said seriously, you need to understand that this isn't something you can control or contain. The techniques we've developed here are spreading because consciousness naturally seeks connection and cooperation. The Empire can either learn to work with this evolution or find itself increasingly isolated. Realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just a new technology or weapon, but a fundamental shift in how intelligent species related to each other and their environment. What would you need from the Empire to consider a partnership? Admiral asked carefully. Doctor looked around at her diverse companions before answering. Proof that you're serious about changing. Start with one world. Show us that the Empire can govern through cooperation instead of domination. If that works, we can explore expanding the relationship. The challenge hung in the air between them, offering possibilities that could transform the galaxy or destroy everything the Empire had built over 3 centuries of expansion. Which world, found himself asking. 6 months after the unprecedented diplomatic mission to 442b, found himself serving as the Empire's first symbiosis liaison officer on the contested world of IV. The irony wasn't lost on him that the pilot who had once been sent to destroy Doctor was now implementing the cooperation protocols she had proposed. IV had been chosen carefully. A recently conquered world with a rebellious population, rich in rare minerals that the Empire needed, and home to an ecosystem complex enough to support symbiotic integration. If the cooperation experiment succeeded here, it could serve as a model for transforming the Empire's approach to territorial governance. The transformation hadn't been easy. Emperor had faced significant resistance from the High Council when he announced the new protocols. 3 council members had resigned rather than support what they termed accommodation with inferior species. War Marshal had publicly declared that negotiating with conquered populations would lead to the Empire's collapse. But the alternative was becoming increasingly clear. Intelligence reports showed that symbiosis networks were spreading throughout human space and beginning to appear in territories controlled by other species. Traditional military responses had proven ineffective, and the economic costs of maintaining control through force alone were becoming unsustainable. new command center on IV reflected the experimental nature of their mission. Instead of the typical Imperial bunker complex, they had established facilities that integrated technology with local architecture and environmental considerations. The buildings breathed with the planet's atmospheric rhythms and drew power from biological processes rather than imported fusion cells. "Daily report, Commander," announced his aide, Lieutenant, as she entered the organic workspace. "Show me the mining production figures first," requested. The living walls displayed holographic charts showing mineral extraction rates over the past 6 months. The numbers told a remarkable story. Under traditional Imperial occupation, IV had produced approximately 12,000 tons of rare minerals per month, while requiring significant military force to suppress local resistance. Since implementing symbiosis protocols, production had increased to nearly 30,000 tons monthly with 0 military incidents. "They are actually helping us find new deposits," Lieutenant reported. "Their geological knowledge of this world far exceeds our survey data. They've identified mineral veins that our scanners missed completely." Nodded, still amazed by how much the situation had changed. "What about the integration reports?" Doctor's team arrived yesterday with 6 new symbiosis coordinators. They're beginning work with the deep cave communities that have been most resistant to cooperation. The mention of Doctor's name still caused complex reactions in his consciousness. The human who had cost him his legs had become his most valuable advisor in learning to build bridges instead of burning them. Their working relationship had evolved from mutual wariness to genuine professional respect. "Any word from the capital?" he asked. "Admiral transmitted this morning. The High Council wants updated projections on expansion of the program to other worlds." Activated the communication array and connected to the Admiral's office on Prime. His image appeared in the holographic display, showing the strain of defending their experimental policies against increasingly vocal opposition. "Commander, I need good news," the Admiral said without preamble. "Counselor is pushing for termination of the symbiosis program. He's convinced the Emperor that we're weakening Imperial authority by negotiating with conquered populations." "Sir, the results speak for themselves," replied, sharing the production data through the communication link. "IV is now our most profitable mining operation despite requiring 0 military oversight. I've seen the numbers, but the opposition isn't impressed by economic arguments. They're concerned about precedent. If word spreads that the Empire negotiates with rebel populations, they worry it will encourage uprisings throughout our territories." Felt the familiar frustration that had become common when dealing with traditional Imperial thinking. "Admiral, with respect, we're not negotiating with rebels. We're partnering with resources. They aren't helping us because they fear our weapons. They're contributing because they benefit from the relationship." Explain that to Counselor. He's demanding concrete proof that symbiosis protocols can be scaled to manage entire sectors, not just individual worlds. Before could respond, his communication system chimed with an urgent priority signal. The source identification showed it was coming from Doctor on 442B. "Admiral, Doctor is calling in. This might be relevant to the Council's concerns." Authorized the expanded communication link. Doctor's image appeared alongside the Admiral's, but she looked different than during their last conversation. Her integration with the planetary symbiosis had progressed further, giving her an almost ethereal appearance that combined human features with flowing, organic enhancements. "Commander, Admiral," she greeted them. "I'm calling with urgent information that affects the Empire's expansion plans." "What kind of information?" Admiral asked. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring network detected massive fleet movements in the Andromeda spiral arm. An empire calling itself, the hegemony has been systematically conquering species throughout that region using methods that make traditional tactics look gentle. Felt his secondary hearts begin beating faster. How massive? Conservative estimates suggest 12,000 warships, with planet-killing capability and no apparent interest in preserving conquered populations. They're strip-mining entire worlds and eliminating any species that resists. The implications were staggering. The Empire's territorial expansion had always involved conquest and subjugation, but they generally preserved conquered populations for their labor value. An enemy that simply destroyed everything in its path represented a threat to all established civilizations. "Doctor, what's their estimated arrival time in our region?" Admiral asked. "If they maintain current expansion velocity, the hegemony will reach the outer territories of both human and space within 18 months. Realized immediately why Doctor was sharing this intelligence. "You're suggesting that our species need to cooperate to survive this threat." "More than cooperate," she replied. "The conventional military approach that both humans and have used won't work against an enemy with such overwhelming numerical superiority. But symbiosis networks have capabilities that traditional fleets can't counter." Admiral looked troubled. "You're proposing a military alliance between the Empire and human territories." "I'm proposing something much more comprehensive," Doctor said. "A true merger of capabilities. Human innovation and adaptability, organizational skills and technology, plus the enhanced capabilities that emerge from symbiotic integration." The scope of what she was suggesting was breathtaking. Not just an alliance between governments, but a fundamental integration of entire civilizations. "That would require approval from the Emperor himself," Admiral observed. "Actually," Doctor smiled, "it would require something much more significant. It would require your people to trust that cooperation produces better results than domination." An alert signal interrupted their conversation. Lieutenant's voice came through the communication system with obvious excitement. "Commander, you need to see this immediately. We're receiving communications from across the system." Authorized the new data stream, and his displays filled with incoming messages from mining platforms, research stations, and orbital facilities throughout the system. Each message carried essentially the same content: voluntary offers of cooperation from species and installations that had previously been under Imperial control through force. "What's happening?" Admiral demanded. Doctor's expression grew thoughtful as she reviewed the incoming data. "Word is spreading about the success on IV. Other conquered populations are requesting to transition to symbiosis protocols instead of traditional occupation." Realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in Imperial history. Instead of expansion through conquest, they were seeing growth through voluntary association. Species were choosing to join the Empire because they saw benefit in cooperation. "Commander," came another transmission, this one from the deep cave communities that had been most resistant to Imperial presence. "We've detected unusual quantum signatures in the outer system. Something big is approaching." Immediately activated long-range sensors and felt his consciousness go cold. The signature patterns matched descriptions of hegemony scout ships from Doctor's intelligence reports. "They're here," he announced quietly. Admiral's image flickered as he accessed fleet deployment data. "Impossible. They're supposed to be 18 months away." Doctor's expression grew grim. "Unless they've been conducting reconnaissance missions much longer than we realized. Commander, how quickly can you implement full symbiosis integration on IV?" "Full integration?" asked. "That would require—" He paused, understanding what she was suggesting. "You want to turn the entire system into a living network." "It's the only way to survive what's coming," she replied. "Traditional defenses won't work against hegemony weapons, but a fully integrated planetary consciousness can adapt faster than any military technology." The scout ships were approaching rapidly, their quantum signatures growing stronger by the minute. In a few hours, they would be in weapons range of IV. Traditional Imperial protocol would be to evacuate valuable personnel and equipment while destroying anything useful to the enemy. But found himself considering a radically different option. "Doctor, can your people provide real-time integration support?" "Already en route," she replied. "And Commander, the symbiosis networks across 12 star systems are offering assistance. You're not facing this threat alone." Admiral's expression showed the strain of rapid decision-making under impossible circumstances. "Commander, I'm authorizing whatever actions you deem necessary to preserve Imperial interests on IV." Looked around the organic command center, feeling the planet's consciousness beginning to stir around them. The population was already responding to the approaching threat, preparing defenses that no military academy had ever taught. "Lieutenant," he commanded, "begin full integration protocols. Connect every Imperial facility with the planetary network." As the transformation began, realized that the legless pilot who had once been sent to destroy a human scientist was about to test whether cooperation could defeat an enemy that conquering had never managed to stop. The future of two civilizations might depend on proving that symbiosis was stronger than domination. Outside, the hegemony scouts were closing fast, bringing war to a world that had just learned to make peace.